Welcome back everyone, Alex Javaris here. In this video I'm going to be talking about the planes of the head. I recently did a full-length real-time portrait painting demonstration which was released on my Patreon channel, and in that video I keep referring to the different planes of the head. Now this idea of planes is really important, so I've decided to make a standalone video to show you exactly what I'm talking about. The term plane refers to a change in direction on the surface of an object. Each time the surface of an object turns towards or away from a light source, there's a change in tonal value from light to dark. So, each time there's a change in value, it indicates a different plane. Just like a sculptor carves out different planes to create an object's form, we use light and dark paint to replicate the planes of an object in order to give it a 3D appearance. So, whenever we're thinking about tonal values, it's very useful if we can identify the different planes of the object we're looking at. In this demonstration, I'm going to show you a key landmark that you need to look for in a portrait, which will make identifying the major planes of the head much easier. I'm actually going to be doing two demos in this video, and for this first one we have a bust of Joan of Arc lit from the front to provide lots of contrast. Now, because the appearance of planes is caused by light and dark, for this demo I shall be working in monochrome using ultramarine and titanium white. So here I'm starting to map out the head, with a few lines to indicate the top, bottom, front and back. And here I'm placing some horizontal lines to indicate the brow, the eyes and the bottom of the nose. These next few lines, from the cheekbone down to the jaw and along the temple, indicate where the shadow meets the light. And because the side of Joan's head is in shadow, these lines also show us where the front of her head meets the side. I'm thinking of the head as a box with a front plane and a side plane, and the edge of the shadow represents the corner of the head. So, just like a sculptor starts off by carving out the big planes of their subject before refining it with smaller planes, by identifying the corner of the head, I'm establishing the big planes of my subject, the front and the side. With the front plane worked out, I'm proceeding to place the features within it. Now, I don't normally do as much underdrawing as this, but because in this particular setup the eyes, nose and mouth all have these clearly defined shadows, I've decided to adopt more of an academic approach and draw in these dark shapes with ultramarine. I'm now using the ultramarine to mass in the shadows in the background, unifying all the darks with the same even tone. Next, I'm massing in the lights. Here, I'm adding a highlight to the bridge of the nose. As I proceed to paint onto my original drawing, I've noticed I've made the distance between the eyes and the bottom of the nose too long. So I'll need to readjust the eyes to make them lower. This is a great example of why you should never be too attached to any drawing you make at the start, and why you should always be checking and re-evaluating your drawing throughout the painting. Right, so here I'm adding a fourth value in between the shadows and the lights to the edge at the corner of the head. Do you see how by placing just one intermediate value it turns the form, rounding the head from the side to the front? Back to our analogy of a sculptor, this fourth value represents the next plane to be chiselled away from our block of marble. As I continue to refine the corner of the head, I want you to pay close attention to the variety along its edge, how it gets softer and harder, how in different places the value transitions between light and dark are more gradual than others. You've got to realise edges, values and planes are essentially all the same thing. So the next time you see a soft edge, try to think of it as different planes. This is really important if you want your work to appear painterly. Instead of blending a soft edge, try to identify the different planes and then paint them with solid separate brush marks. Here I'm starting work on the top of the head, which in this case is a smooth round dome. When I'm confronted with a situation like this, where I have a very gradual transition from dark to light, instead of adding lots of small planes, each with a different value gradation, I'll try to simplify and reduce the number of planes to give it a more structured appearance, maybe leaving just one or two values in between the dark and the light. Once the light areas have been completed, which are my centre of interest, I'll then move on to the dark areas, finishing this off with a few dark accents and some of the much more subtle reflected lights. So, in this first demo, I've shown you how important planes are for rounding the form and how they produce value gradations and different edges in between the shadows and the lights. Now, that's all very well, you may say, but what happens to the planes if you can't see any shadows? So, for the second of today's demos, I thought I'd show you what happens by painting the same cast lit from the other side. People generally find setups like this under more even lighting more challenging, because they don't have all the easy to define shadow shapes to lock into. Next time you're in an art class, notice how all the places around the model where you can see the shadow shapes most clearly always get taken first. But I believe it's important not to be limited in this way. We don't often experience the world under strong studio lighting, and there are some subjects like women or children where more subtle lighting can be preferable. So what do you do when faced with a setup when there aren't any strong shadows? Well, in a situation like this, being able to recognise the planes of the head can be really helpful. I've started off in much the same way as I did before, mapping out the head with simple lines and massing in all the darks. But here, because I don't see any shadows for the features, I'm massing in the whole front plane of the head and some of the side with the same light tone. Here, I'm just indicating the brow and the bottom of the nose. This next line is a vertical line that runs from the corner of the eye down to the back of the nose, and it's the place where the side plane of the nose meets the front plane of the face. Then, instead of painting shadows, I'm going to start placing the highlights at the back of the nose, then on the cheekbone and just above the eyebrow. I want you to notice how all of these highlights appear right on the corner of the head, or on the inside corner where the front of the face meets the side of the nose. That's because when someone is lit more evenly like this, the corner of the head will often face directly opposite the light source and so will catch the light. So, next time you have to paint someone under an even light and you can't see any shadows, remember to look for the highlights, and remember the highlights will appear on the corner of the head. With the highlights added, I'll then use them to work out where to place the features. And once the eyes, nose and mouth are placed accurately, I'll then move on to the rest of the head, which this time is much lighter, the only real shadow being under the jaw. I hope these two demos have given you a bit more of an idea of what I'm on about when I talk about planes. The main thing I want you to take away from this is how planes, values and edges are all interconnected. And also to look out for the corner of the head, which is a really useful landmark. If you want to learn more about planes and see how they can be applied when working in colour, remember to check out my Patreon channel, where parts 1 and 2 of my first ever portrait demo filmed entirely in real time is now available, and you can see exactly how I paint a portrait from life. I'd also like to take this opportunity to say a massive thank you to all of my patrons for supporting me and making it possible for me to produce longer tutorials and offer more in-depth instruction. And there we have it. I guess some subjects, like antique cast, just look better with more contrast. What do you reckon? Anyway, I hope you guys have found this useful. Thanks for watching.